and good afternoon. It's great to be able to join you all virtually, and I'm really grateful for all of the folks who are joining us today. Some in Iowa, some in Pennsylvania, and across the country, and then also the members that are joining as well. I know this isn't obviously a traditional hearing that we would typically have in rural development, ag trade, and entrepreneurship, but I am very, very grateful to just get to have this discussion along with ranking member Dr. Joyce as well, who I know, it's been great to get to work with over the last year and a half. And again, we are adapting to what we can do right now and making sure that we're bringing some issues to the forefront that need to be paid attention to at the moment. So I appreciate everybody's ability right now to adapt and be part of this. And, that's just part of what we've been doing on small business, trying to figure out how we can provide relief, leadership, and oversight that we know millions of American small businesses and communities are counting on right now. As the Congresswoman from Iowa's 1st Congressional District, I know firsthand that our friends, neighbors, and businesses and rural communities are dealing with a lot of challenges, especially right now with the economic and public health crisis obviously brought on by this pandemic. We know every part of the country is feeling the impact of this pandemic, and that small businesses in particular face short-term and then also obviously long-term threats for business owners and their employees alike. These challenges are especially great in our rural communities, where small businesses and where they desperately need critical infrastructure like high-speed internet, and where that is often limited. That's a topic that we've actually talked about quite a bit on this subcommittee, and I'm positive will come up today. Many jobs in rural America are considered essential as well. That's another thing that I know is a little bit different even than the rest of the country. Our farmers and agricultural small businesses produce food for families in the US and around the world. They are indispensable first links in the food supply chain, but farming is tough and unpredictable business, even in the best of the times, and especially over the last couple of years. Never, and on top of it now, when we've got workers that are forced to stay home, our farmers are unable sometimes to even get out to the fields to plant. Processing plants and other vital links in the supply chain are disrupted by obviously massive outbreaks that we saw in particular in my district, and I know across the country as well. The outbreaks we've seen in my districts in places like Black Hawk and Tama counties illustrate how important it is also to protect employees and ensure businesses have the guidance and support they need to safely operate. On our main streets, too, small businesses lead the way. When this crisis is over, we must make sure our small town pharmacists, town square restaurants, hardware stores, and florists, just for some examples, are still in businesses and serving their communities. Right now, unfortunately, their futures are in doubt, and we have a lot of folks who are worried, and for good reason, which is why we have a lot more work to do. So while Congress has taken steps, obviously, to provide important financial support during this pandemic, we must remain vigilant to the needs of our rural areas and ensure they are fully included in this economic recovery. Right now, unfortunately, we're seeing signs that they might not be. The CARES Act, which was signed into law March 27th, directed the Small Business Administration to prioritize small business entities in underserved and rural markets. So that's great, but according to the Small Business Administration Inspector General, this has not actually happened. Congress has also provided additional funding to our small business development centers, which do great work, and other resource organizations to support small businesses in accessing that Paycheck Protection Program, and also the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. However, the guidance the Small Business Administration provided to our lenders and these resource partners has been unclear and piecemeal, leaving many rural communities without the support they need to make the most of the federal aid intended to get them through this crisis. We've also heard issues about some of the really big businesses getting millions of dollars while our smaller businesses were shut out of the program. We do not have great information on the businesses that benefit from this program or any reliable data on lending and business engagement in our rural areas. We definitely need more transparency in the program, and I'll continue to push for reforms that allow us to practice better oversight and make sure resources are received by the communities in need. I'm concerned that the Small Business Administration as well may not be doing enough to help our rural businesses as we speak. In early April, I learned that the director of the Office of Rural Affairs at Small Business Administration was being transferred away from the agency during this time of unprecedented crisis. To address this, I did lead a bipartisan letter to Administrator Carranza expressing concern about the lack of a full time director at a time when we are definitely in need those dedicated resources for rural businesses so they can survive this crisis. So far, we've not heard yet back from the Small Business Administration, which is obviously pretty disappointing. Today, we are going to hear about the challenges facing rural communities from the folks who are living it. How the COVID-19 response programs are supporting small businesses, and what additional steps need to be taken to ensure that policy solutions are flexible and dynamic to support small businesses and rural communities as they work hard to address the economic and public health challenges they are facing every single day. I hope today's discussion will help us find ways to improve coordination and collaboration between these programs so that they can serve small businesses across all sectors of the rural economy. And again, thank you so much for our witnesses who are joining. Thank you, Ranking Member Dr. Joyce, for joining as well. I'm looking forward to this discussion. These are just issues we've got to raise and make sure that we're doing our job on this committee, highlighting the things that need to be fixed, working and highlighting the things that are highlighting the stuff that works well and making sure we're doing more of that and fixing what's not working. So on that note, I'd like now to yield to Ranking Member Dr. Joyce for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Across our country, communities of all kinds have felt the devastating effects of the coronavirus. Families have watched loved ones suffer or even succumb to illness. Educations have been interrupted, livelihoods have been disrupted or destroyed. While the toll on urban communities cannot be understated, in many ways, rural communities are particularly vulnerable to the long-term economic impact of this pandemic. As the virus takes root in our rural communities, some of these incredible vulnerabilities are additionally exposed. Dominant industries in rural America tend to produce jobs that can't be performed from home, which decrease the effectiveness of social distancing and stay-at-home orders. Small businesses are also suffering from coronavirus mitigation mandates. Many small businesses across the country and in my own district in Pennsylvania have seen profits plummet in the wake of this outbreak, sometimes resulting in permanently closing. Coronavirus pandemic has also emphasized the need to aggressively and purposely empower rural areas to become digitally sustainable. Improving rural broadband, as you've heard me say many times, is a top priority. And for this subcommittee, I look forward to the continued work that we have initiated with our chairwoman on this important issue. In response to the ongoing crisis, several measures have been implemented, including the rapid deployment of loans through the newly founded Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance. This committee has already begun examining the Small Business Administration's rollout of this unprecedented loan program. And while there is certainly room for improvement, we must take a moment to recognize the sheer magnitude of the task imposed upon the SBA and the agency's important response, even as it operated under these incredibly abnormal circumstances. For all its faults, the SBA has successfully dispersed millions of dollars through the PPP to small businesses, making a vital difference for the employees and the employers alike. Unfortunately, as the SBA Inspector General found in its May 8th report, the SBA did not provide guidance to lenders about prioritizing borrowers in underserved and rural markets, and therefore, rural businesses may not have received the loans that were intended. Further, since the SBA declined to collect the demographic data on PPP borrowers, we are currently unable to identify how much of these loans have been dispersed to small businesses in rural areas. Conversely, we know that the SBA has more than 690 staff members in 68 field offices across the nation, which serve primary points of contact for delivering the SBA programs directly to rural communities. I would like to extend my gratitude to Regional SBA Director Steve Bolger and Dr. Kelly Hunt with the Pittsburgh District Office for their hard work on behalf of Pennsylvania 13 businesses. While improvements can be made, I'm especially thankful for the collaboration of the SBA and the USDA and for the efforts to ensure that our agricultural producers have access to these incredibly critical resources. Today, I am pleased to have Rick Ebert, President of the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, here with us. Mr. Ebert has served as the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau President since 2014, and he is an invaluable resource to Pennsylvania farmers. President Ebert is a resident of the 13th Congressional District and operates a dairy and sheep farm in Blairsville, Westmoreland County. Mr. Ebert, thank you for all what you do for Pennsylvania's farmers. It is my honor to have you join us today, and I look forward to hearing from your insights on how this virus has affected rural communities across Pennsylvania. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Joyce. I appreciate that the gentleman yields back. I also now like to explain how this forum will proceed. And before I do that, I want to give a special thank you, and I'm sure Dr. Joyce will join me in this as well. The staff on the Small Business Committee helping out with this and trying to be creative of how we have these conversations. So thank you for all the work that you guys are doing behind the scenes here and walking us through how to do this. So speaking of how to do this, this is how this will proceed. So each panelist will have 5 minutes to provide a status update, and each committee member will then receive 5 minutes for questions. This is very similar to what we do in person then in Washington. So please ensure, though, that your microphone is turned on when you begin speaking and that you return to mute when you're finished. I know we've got Naveen on the Small Business Committee as well, who's going to be, I think, helping with that is if you guys do forget, but just if you guys, I think, have found where those are. So just make sure you're unmuted when you're speaking. And then I'd now like to introduce and thank our panelists for coming today or wherever they're at during their busy schedules. I know this is just an interesting and difficult time for a lot of folks just all across the country, and you guys taking the time today will help so many across the country, as well as we learn from your experiences and what we can do better here. So first, I'd like to introduce with us today, we've got Bill Menner. Mr. Menner runs a consulting firm focused on community development and rural partnerships. He's also the executive director of the Iowa Rural Development Council. Mr. Menner also served as the USDA Iowa State Director for Rural Development from 2009 to 2017. So Mr. Menner has quite a bit of experience in this area, and we're excited to have him here today. And then we also have Melissa Moretz. Miss Moretz is a commercial portfolio manager with First Citizens Bank and also a farmer in Worth County, Iowa, that I've gotten to know now, both visiting close to her hometown earlier last year, and then also when she came to Washington, D.C., along with, I believe, Ms. Moretz was with the Farm Bureau that day. So I'm happy to have her joining us as well. And then we've got Isiah Polonius. Ms. Polonius is the CEO of Communities Unlimited, a community development financial institution and rural development hub that provides direct assistance and capital to underserved communities in rural America. So thank you so much for joining us as well. And then we've got Rick Ebert, who I know Dr. Joyce mentioned, is the president of the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau and on the board of directors of the American Farm Bureau. Mr. Ebert operates a dairy and sheep farm and grows alfalfa, corn, and soybeans in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. Thank you again all for being here today. And with that, I'd like to first recognize Mr. Menner for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Madam Chairwoman, Ranking Member Dr. Joyce, committee members, ladies and gentlemen. Again, thanks for this opportunity to visit with you today. I live in an Iowa town of 9,000, and in our state, that's considered a mid-sized city. I am the executive director of 2 statewide organizations focused on rural vitality, health, and well-being. Now, in normal times, those goals are challenging but impactful. Rural vitality, health, and well-being. Rural residents, as you know, tend to be older. They have lower incomes, more chronic disease. They're also more likely to be entrepreneurial, more likely to own their own home, more likely to be a veteran. Small businesses in rural places fight for customers due to the smaller populations inherent in a rural place. Their margins are smaller. They often live on the edge, likely with less cash on hand than their urban counterparts. Rural equity can be difficult to secure. But in these COVID-19 times, these small businesses are at great risk. Many were closed or remain closed or saw their sales diminish dramatically. By the way, this also applies to rural hospitals and clinics too. It's hard to tell how many will not survive, but the impact of these eventual closures of some will change the face of many small town main streets. Certainly, CARES Act programs like EIDL and PPP have had a beneficial impact for some, if they knew about it, if they knew how to access it, or if they had a bank willing to work with them on it. In very small towns, the capacity of the community to respond and react to resources and opportunities can be blocked by a lack of knowledge, especially if you don't have a chamber or an economic development group or even a nearby SBDC. Rural communities and the people and the businesses in them can miss out on programs like PPP. Now, as the Congresswoman mentioned, I used to work for USDA Rural Development. That's an agency with employees in field offices across the country. They have the ability to go into towns and provide critical technical assistance. But their FTEs are down and their territories are getting larger, and it's hard to get everywhere. There is a dramatic need for resource providers to work hand in hand with leaders and business owners in these small rural communities. And among the hardest hit by the pandemic are the nonprofits, especially the 501c4s and C6s. They were ineligible for PPP and oftentimes for state programs, and yet they're the groups that are at the forefront of providing support and guidance and technical assistance. Some of them have even been forced to close their doors. As I think ahead to what a COVID recovery looks like and what opportunities will exist in rural America, there is, to me, no doubt about the key. High-speed broadband access will make or break rural America. Small businesses in many places have pivoted to provide a greater online presence, assuming their internet speeds are sufficient to do so. Rural residents are working remotely in huge numbers, assuming they can connect. Rural communities are envisioning tech-based co-working spaces and incubators and venues for online collaboration, assuming they have a telecommunications partner who can get them speeds of more than 15 megabits per second. Unfortunately, too much of rural America is disconnected, and the opportunities that arise from the ashes of this pandemic in regard to distributed work and online commerce and tech-based collaboration will be lost. 84 years ago, Congress recognized an inequity between rural and urban when it passed the Rural Electrification Act. Private utilities were more than willing to invest in densely populated places, as opposed to places where they had to run an electrical line down a dirt road to serve 2 houses. It didn't make sense for them, so government stepped in. USDA has programs, the FCC has programs, but the available dollars don't even scratch the surface of what's needed for rural America to give them the same access to high-speed connectivity. Now, there are entities out there, the rural telephone cooperatives, who are doing an amazing job oftentimes with money from the Rural Utilities Service, today's successor organization to the REA. But at the same time, the capacity of fiber, when you have fiber to the home, is unlimited. It's infinite, limited only by what equipment is at either end. We have a chance to step up right now. You have a chance to step up right now and protect the futures of rural residents, rural small businesses, rural hospitals and clinics, and rural governments, and give them the most vital 21st century technology. Thank you for what you all do for rural America and the service you provide to our country.
Thank you, Mr. Menner. I really appreciate hearing from you today, and thanks so much for being a part of this. I now like to recognize Ms. Moretz for 5 minutes.
Congressman Finkenauer, can everybody hear me? Give me a nod.
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
I can't we can hear you. Is that right?
You can't see me?
Oh, I can see you now. Never mind.
Okay.
There you are.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much to Congressman Finkenauer for the invitation, as well as the whole group for hearing from me today. It's an honor for me to be able to share my experiences with the SBA programs that have been rolled out during this global pandemic. I want to take a minute to thank all of you for the dedication and service that you have given to small businesses across the United States. I'm sure that when you all decided to serve in this capacity, it probably wasn't on your bucket list to handle a global pandemic. But nonetheless, thank you for your tireless work during these trying times. To further introduce myself, like Ms. Finkenauer said, my name is Melissa Moretz, and I am a small town gal from Kensett, Iowa. Myself, along with my husband, Nate, and our 2 children, Cole and Bria, we live on a small acreage and we're proud 5th generation farmers. My husband and I, we grow corn and soybeans. We raise hay as well, and we have livestock in the capacity of a cow-calf operation, and we raise hogs. We're young farmers ourselves, and we're still learning and navigating our way through what it truly means to own our own business. We began farming in 2016, so just 4 short years ago. Part of our farming operation and strategy includes myself working off the farm full-time. I am currently serving First Citizens Bank, a community bank in Mason City, Iowa, and I'm a commercial portfolio manager for them. My job responsibilities on a normal day-to-day basis pre-pandemic include me helping to develop credit structure that minimizes our financial risk as a bank and also minimizes the financial risk for our customers as well. Since this global pandemic has happened, I was selected to be a part of our bank's CARES Act task force. And what that has entailed, it's given me an opportunity to interact with approximately 90 individuals and businesses across the communities that we serve. And I've been able to help them make their tough financial decisions during this pandemic, as well as assess the SBA programs that are available to them. Our bank as a whole has served over 650 small businesses and customers, and we've been able to bring over $86 million in paycheck protection funds to our communities. Combining my experience with being a small business owner and a team member of First Citizens that was able to directly administer the Paycheck Protection Program, I've had an opportunity to assess both sides of the program, both as a recipient of the PPP as well as in the lending capacity for the PPP. Today, I want to touch on a few highlights before we go into questioning. I was asked to answer 3 questions when we started. What has gone well with SBA programs? What has not gone well? And what more could be done? To highlight what has gone well, the PPP overall in our community and our bank's capacity has been a huge success for our customers. We've had folks on the phone that have been in tears and so grateful to have the opportunity that our bank has been able to provide them that. And we were able to provide them that because of the action that you guys have taken. I have a local business owner that I worked with directly. While we were filling out the application together, he stopped me and he said, Melissa, I am responsible for 9 families. What do I do if I can't take care of those 9 families? And at that point in time, I realized that this is what we're here to do. This is what this whole program was designed to do. So that's one small story of success out of that program. The EIDL program is going to serve a much similar capacity to a lot of our customers. We finance dairy operations, And without an EIDL loan, these folks would not make it through this. We all know the dairy industry is tough now. It was tough prior to the pandemic hitting as well. So they will receive some money from that as well. Some things that did not go as well as planned with the PPP program. Congresswoman Finkenauer mentioned earlier that the guidance had been slow to come. And a big issue we are seeing now is we have people that are getting close to a forgiveness timeframe, and they have just been issued forgiveness guidance. So they've been spending this money for 6 weeks, and now they're unsure if they did it correctly. What more can we do to support rural economies during this COVID-19 pandemic? One thing Mr. Menner had mentioned as well, legislation for PPP eligibility for 501c6 organizations, including chambers of commerce and economic development groups. Our small chamber of commerce in Mason City has seen an $88,000 budget reduction this year because they have had to postpone or cancel programs and events. These folks are small businesses that help all of our other small businesses run, and them being eligible for a PPP will bolster our economy in general. As well as Mr. Menner had mentioned, the rural broadband access is vitally important. I've been working from home for the last 2 months, and thankfully we do have in our area a good source of rural broadband, but it's not the same just a few miles away. So thank you again for the opportunity to talk today. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. And I know next we've got Ms. Polonius as well. And I'm grateful that you're joining us. And with that, I will recognize Ms. Polonius for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Finkenauer, Ranking Member Dr. Joyce, members of the committee. I'm honored to speak to you this afternoon on behalf of Communities Unlimited, one of 6 multi-state nonprofit organizations that comprise the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, a national network also known as RCAP. Communities Unlimited and RCAP partners work to move rural communities from poverty to sustainable prosperity. Communities Unlimited has been a certified community development financial institution since 2002, an SBA microlender since 2009, and we provide technical assistance through the USDA Rural Business Development Grant. We function as a rural development hub, serving Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Alabama. A footprint that comprises 45% of America's persistent poverty counties. 60% of people living in persistent poverty counties are people of color. So I'm going to address the impact of COVID-19 on rural economies with just a couple of examples. But let me begin by saying that as of 2019, in our footprint, employment in non-metro counties had not yet returned to levels before the Great Recession. We were still in recovery when COVID-19 hit. Beginning on March 16th, our team began calling every single small business borrower and technical assistance client. By March 23rd, 95% of our business borrowers had closed their doors. Over the next few weeks, we will learn more if these are temporary or permanent closures. In Arkansas, 2,100 childcare providers, 59% of which serve rural areas, 915 of those 2,100 childcare providers are now closed. Without childcare services, it would be difficult or next to impossible for rural employees to return to work or find new jobs. Finally, a study by the University of Arkansas Extension estimates that the tourism sector in our state laid off 80 to 90% of its workforce in April and May. Related businesses have closed. Those are just a few examples. So what in the CARES Act is working well for rural communities? First, I want to express my respect for SBA employees in Washington and in our state offices across our footprint who work day and night to stand up these programs in only a few days. Most helpful to our rural economies is the SBA Debt Relief Program created by Section 1112 of the CARES Act, which appropriated $17 billion to enable SBA to make 6 months of principal and interest payments for each existing borrower of SBA lenders. This also applies to new borrowers. This program needs additional funding, and the time frame needs to be extended for new borrowers through the end of 2021. The Paycheck Protection Program, In round one, 30 of our clients approached approved banks for PPP loans. Only 2 were funded. The other 28 heard nothing back. We are part of the Partners for Rural Transformation, and 2 of our CDFI partners, Hope Credit Union and the Rural Community Assistance Corporation, also a member of RCAP, agreed to make PPP loans to our qualifying clients. Through them, we now have 26 PPP loans approved for $428,000 and saving 135 rural jobs. More are in the pipeline. Finally, the SBA Economic Injury and Disaster Loans are the only funds available to help reopen small businesses that were forced to close. Those funds appear to be exhausted. What did not work well for rural communities? Our experience with our rural business clients showed that small businesses needed to have a personal relationship with a banker in order to access the payroll protection program. Many of our rural communities have not seen a single bank branch in over a decade, making this almost an impossible barrier to overcome. I would like to make 3 policy recommendations for congressional consideration. First, the $1 billion for the CDFI fund laid out by the HEROES Act on May 12th to capitalize the very CDFIs that support rural communities is an essential strategy for recovery. Second, additional legislation in COVID response to create dedicated funding streams for micropolitan areas and small towns with populations below 50,000, targeting rural healthcare infrastructure, struggling water and wastewater systems, rural small businesses, and minority-owned businesses is critical for an equitable recovery. Finally, a strong and modernized Community Reinvestment Act that incentivizes the banking industry to invest alongside us in rural communities is now essential for recovery. The failure of the Paycheck Protection Program to reach rural businesses is the direct result of decades of bank divestment from rural communities across the country. On behalf of Communities Unlimited, the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, 950 certified CDFIs, thousands of rural communities and small businesses we all serve across our country, I want to thank you for allowing me to provide this perspective. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Am I off mute? Okay, I'm seeing the heads nod, so thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Naveen, for unmuting me. Thank you, Ms. Polonius. And now we've got Mr. Ebert. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman Finkenauer, Ranking Member Joyce, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you again for inviting me to participate in this forum. My name is Rick Ebert. I operate a dairy and sheep farm in Blairsville, Pennsylvania. I am the president of Pennsylvania Farm Bureau and serve on the American Farm Bureau Board of Directors and the AFBF Executive Committee. I offered today's remarks on behalf of Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, the state's largest general farm organization. I'll discuss COVID-19 impacts on agriculture and highlight barriers we've encountered with the SBA's Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. On the surface, production agriculture remains the same as before COVID-19. Farmers are still milking cows, planting and harvesting, and feeding livestock. But look deeper, and there's dairy farmers dumping milk, vegetable and fruit farmers plowing under good crops, and livestock producers facing the heart-wrenching decision to euthanize animals. Farmers are trying to find personal protective equipment, keep their workers safe, and making business decisions based upon a host of unknowns. We are facing enormous pressure, financial, business, and mental, because of the impact of COVID-19 on the food supply chain. These are tough times, yet we are still farming. As we entered 2020, we were in the 8th year of a down farm economy. After several years of low commodity prices, trade uncertainty, severe weather, many farmers were hoping this year would be better. But COVID-19 hit. Markets started to tumble, hopes for recovery evaporated, and farmers are now wondering if their businesses will survive. We appreciate the efforts of Congress and the administration to help agriculture, allotting funds for the new USDA programs and including production agriculture in the Small Business Administration programs. Farmers were optimistic about the potential for the EIDL and PPP programs, but we soon found barriers to participate. In the first round, most of agriculture was ineligible for EIDL, and farmers made very limited use of PPP funding. In fact, only 1.3% of the total approved funding and 2.8% of approved PP applications came from agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting sectors. Our sector also had the lowest average loan approval. There are a variety of reasons why, but key here is that agriculture enterprises are different from other small businesses in many ways. We use different tax forms, a labor force that is supported by seasonal employees, including foreign workers, utilization of labor contractors rather than directly hired employees, and rent that is not limited simply to a single structure, but often includes land, equipment, and multiple structures, etc. Other barriers included piecemeal guidance for agricultural operations delayed in approving rural lenders, confusion about the definition of personal place of residence for H-2A workers, uncertainty about loan forgiveness and potential tax implications, and simply not enough funds to meet the needs. Schedule F is an example. Initially, until SBA issued guidance that the Schedule F was acceptable to show net profit, some farm businesses were being denied by their banks because they didn't have a Schedule C. Additionally, because of the nature of farm accounting, many farmers, 30% in 2017, showed a loss on their Schedule F. Since SBA determined that this qualifies the farm taxpayer for loan eligibility based on earnings, even if they showed earnings on other forms, many farmers can only qualify for a PPP loan based on employee payroll costs, while self-employed operators were not able to access themselves. The bottom line is any program that includes farmers needs to take agriculture's unique nature into account. We appreciate the role the committee has played in making SBA programs more accessible to agriculture, and we recognize the challenges of trying to quickly fit agriculture into SBA programs not designed for agriculture. To their credit, SBA and USDA tried to answer questions and provide guidance, but a slow release of information has made it difficult for farmers to apply. With that, I look forward to questions as they come up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ebert. We really appreciate it. And also all of the, again, panelists that have are participating today. And now we're going to start the question and answer portion. And I just want to reiterate too, I was not very good on the time expired part of things for the panelists, but I wanted to make sure you guys were able to say everything you wanted. But when we're doing the question and answer, I'll be a little more diligent on that just to make sure we can get through the questions in as many members as possible. So thank you again for joining us. And for that, I will recognize actually myself for the first 5 minutes. And my first question is for Mr. Menner. Can you speak to the importance? I know you kind of mentioned this in your statement as well, but just why brick and mortar businesses are just so important for our rural communities and why the Paycheck Protection Program is needed to keep them afloat, and just some of the examples that you have seen, and just again, kind of for the folks joining us throughout the country, why yes, we need to make sure that our businesses have connectivity issues, but we also, again, have to make sure that our brick and mortar Main Street businesses stay afloat.
Well, I mean, it's inherent, I think, in your question, Congresswoman, and that is, what's a Main Street, without businesses? A quick story. When I took over as a downtown developer here in Grinnell, shortly thereafter, our movie theater closed, and the marquee read "closed." And what could be worse in a small town than having your theater just with a big "closed for business"? That's what empty storefronts say as well. So I think that the Paycheck Protection program has provided an important lifeline to some businesses. Unfortunately, from what I'm hearing, a lot of restaurants could not take advantage of it because it would have required them bringing back their entire staffs when they were only operating, say, for carry out, if at all. Other small businesses who were closed by the governor's mandate here couldn't open, so they couldn't bring back their staff, so they couldn't take advantage of it. So there were limitations, but at the same time, those businesses that were able to access either PPP or EIDL or our state's business grant program or our small town chamber of commerce's program, I would just say that it's part about that. I mentioned rural vitality. Those businesses downtown are part of that quality of life. It's why people choose to live in a small town. And if we lose them, there may be folks who say, I'd rather live in the big city because I can go to Starbucks anytime.
Exactly. And thank you so much, Mr. Menner, for that perspective again for folks who are all across the country and may not be as familiar with our small towns as we are here in Iowa. I know Dr. Joyce is as well in Pennsylvania. Ms. Moretz, on that end, I know Mr. Menner just mentioned the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And I know you had mentioned that there are businesses in your community that took advantage of the EIDL programs and the Paycheck Protection Program. But there was a great deal of misinformation about the programs and people just kind of struggling about, what is the right decision for the business. Now, what we know about these programs, knowing now what we know about these programs, would that have been helpful for the businesses in your community to have had earlier? And then what types of businesses would have been better served by a Paycheck Protection Program than an EIDL loan?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Woman. To the PPP loan, yes, what we do know now would have been better to know 6 weeks ago when the program launched. However, it was not the case. And as the program has progressed, our bank from start day one, April 3rd, when the program launched on the SBA site and we were able to enter applications, there was a lot more weariness from customers to actually accept that loan once we got it approved to where we are now. And I believe Sunday I got an email that the forgiveness application is now out. There's a little bit more ease to it. Much to what Mr. Menner had said was that the programs don't fit restaurants very well, specifically the Paycheck Protection Program. The EIDL is probably more suited to them. I have a business that I've worked with to secure PPP funding where they were able to open to 50% capacity in Iowa. However, they don't have any supply right now. They can't get beef. They're a steakhouse, and that's, the majority of their business with a little bit of chicken on the side. And they don't have access to it right now. So they're really worried about how to spend those funds, the time frame they have to spend those funds, and how it would best fit them. So that's to the PPP program. No, it doesn't fit everybody. It has benefited a lot of folks, though. And in the amount of time that the committee had to roll out the rulings, and as the program went along, we got additional guidance almost daily, sometimes hourly, it felt like. But we rolled through it the best that we could, but I think there is a lot of uncertainty for these borrowers out there, and they're worried at the end of this, am I going to have to pay back this loan or is it going to be forgiven?
Well, thank you so much just for that perspective. And I know my time has expired, so I believe we've got Dr. Joyce is here. And so Dr. Joyce, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Finkenauer. Mr. Ebert, you truly have your finger on the pulse of Pennsylvania agriculture. Personally, as you being a farmer and being the president of the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, could you please explain to us as a group what your personal experiences are with the SBA COVID-19 programs and what you've heard from the different areas of agriculture, from dairy, that you've seen and heard? Could you explain that to the group?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Congressman Joyce, for the question. Actually, I did apply through the EIDL program. I want to thank the SBA for allowing agriculture to be a part of that. I know at the first round, agriculture was not. The EIDL program, when I filled out the application, I'd have to say it was pretty easy for me. That I was very pleased to see because I had been hearing all the nightmares between the PPP program application and the EIDL application, but it went through smoothly for me. I got approved rather quickly. My one concern with it was it gave me a wide range of amounts that I could apply for. My concern is the farmers' misunderstanding of what they're going to be able to use as a grant and what they're actually going to have to pay back. On the PPP side, for farmers, it's been a nightmare of trying to fill out the application, work with especially the lenders in their local towns. Most of them were not SBA preferred lenders, so they had to get approved, and just trying to figure out the whole process. The other questions were asked about, the guidance of what can be forgiven. The details on those guidelines were very slow on coming out, and people were afraid to actually get into those programs because of the slow response of finding out what guidelines are.
And as those guidelines, Mr. Ebert, as they've recently come out, are there any specific questions that farmers are reaching back to you? Do you think that the explicit or the more explicit guidelines move forward? Will that make that process easier?
Yes, it'll help. There again, they're still trying to figure out because SBA wanted the Schedule C, and most farmers use the Schedule F. So like 37% of the farmers showed a loss that they weren't even eligible for it. So if there was a way that we can change that to look at some of the other forms, to maybe take out depreciation or include livestock and equipment sales as part of their earnings, that they would be eligible for this money. But that's what I'm saying. 37% of them showed a loss on their forms, but and that's because they were using Schedule F. So I think it would help if there was a better understanding through SBA of where the farm is actually making its earnings. And the other area is a lot of farmers use, like for myself, I 1099 my sons that help me here on the farm, and the SBA doesn't recognize 1099s as employees.
Are
So
there
that
any
would be a help?
Are there any other key changes that you think would be helpful in allowing the ag community to have more access to these SBA responses?
And I think another area maybe with the H-2A workers, some more clarity on how they can be used for the PPP loans, on guidance on what they can use as H-2A workers for the employee part. There needs to be some clarity on that. And just to make sure the banks understand what the guidelines are that they can use to help the farmer fill out those applications.
Rick, thank you for being part of this program today. I always appreciate the input from the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau and your particular input as being a farmer. Madam Chairman, thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you. And the gentleman's time has expired and gentleman yields back. And with that, I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Maine, Congressman Golden, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Finkenauer. Appreciate you holding this hearing on an important subject for rural communities. I wanted to ask my first question of Ms. Moretz. Do you have any feedback on how the Paycheck Protection Program rules are working or not working for agricultural businesses. And given what we were just listening to, in particular, how does the SBA's 75-25 rule impact entities with high non-payroll costs, making it more difficult for farmers to get a little flexibility out of that program? I think you might have mentioned that in some instances, the EIDL program may be a better fit for some of the costs.
Yeah, good question. So the 75-25% rule for the the PPP funds, 75% of those need to be spent on payroll costs. The additional 25 can be utilized for utilities, rent, or mortgage interest for simplicity. With the farming community and sole proprietors, so those that file a Schedule C, oftentimes they don't draw a salary at all. Our farming operation specifically, I don't write my husband a check for the labor he does. At the end of the day, what's on our bottom line is what we make. So the SBA came out with a ruling for a calculation on how to pay your sole proprietors and Schedule F filers. So what they do is they take your bottom line, so your net income for the year, and they figure out what you would have made weekly on that. And since you have 8 weeks to use those funds up, it's an 850 seconds calculation. So you get to pay yourself for 8 weeks of pay for your bottom line. So that has been the what our Bank for Citizens has been operating off of, that type of calculation. So for specific example, I qualified for a paycheck protection loan, and my husband and I took advantage of that opportunity. I made a transfer to his checking account yesterday to say that this was his PPP paycheck payment for that time. I think the 850 seconds calculation has eased a lot of folks' minds on how much they should or shouldn't pay themselves, because like I said, not many of them draw a salary.
Do you think it would be helpful to give them a little bit more flexibility to use PPP for things like, let's say, PPE, as the gentleman was just talking about, by loosening up that standard a little bit? Or do you think it is appropriately set at 75-25?
I think if we think about the initial purpose of the program, it's called the Paycheck Protection Program, right? We're here to keep people's jobs, to keep people paid off of unemployment, to keep the economy rolling, quote unquote. I don't think that the 75-25% rule is a bad rule by any means. I think that in certain circumstances where folks like myself, we don't draw a salary, it could be used on other things. For example, we're going to pay my husband his paycheck, but then we're going to use it. Normally in our circumstance, I pay for daycare in our family because I'm the one that gets the weekly paycheck, right? Or the bi-weekly paycheck. So for that circumstance, now my husband's going to pay it because the idea is to use those funds for family living expenses. Well, I have a daycare bill every week that comes out that needs to be paid. So he'll be paying that, and like our rent, not our rent. He'll be paying, our cell phone bill, things like that, cost of living. So yes, I do think that in certain circumstances, it could be utilized in a different way, but I do think the intent of the program is to pay people, to get them a regular paycheck.
I appreciate that feedback. I think as we're looking into the future for the recovery phase, the purpose of this hearing, figuring out what businesses need most, and it sounds like a little bit of flexibility in some instances would be great. We're short on time. But I just wanted to quickly ask Ms. Polonius, are you participating as a PPP lender? And if so, do you have any feedback you want to share about what you've seen about the forgiveness rules so far as you go through them?
So we are an SBA microlender, and the SBA microlenders were not approved as PPP lenders until May 8th. Not knowing about the future of the program and how much money was left, at that point, it was very difficult for microlenders to raise the money to then really step into PPPs, which is why we chose to work with those two partners that were already eligible for the PPP. We've created actually two sets of toolkits that are available on our website. The first was to help businesses actually figure out this maze of opportunities and figure out what was best for them. The second toolkit is now to really help businesses figure out and calculate the forgiveness portion.
Thank you very much for that. I see my time has expired there, Madam Chair. So thanks again for holding the hearing.
Thank you. Yes, the gentleman's time has expired and the gentleman yields back. So now I would like to recognize the congressman from Ohio, ranking member of the Committee on Small Business, Mr. Shabbat. You are now recognized.
Thank you very much. I'll direct this to Mr. Ebert, the first question. Rural communities often revolve around their small businesses, and when one small business unfortunately has to close, it can have a ripple effect throughout the small businesses in that community. Given that the pandemic has forced many small businesses to close, hopefully only temporarily, although certainly some of these probably won't come back, but I think the PPP and the EIDL loan program are, we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that these are temporary closures, that they've been shuttered through no fault of their own, and that they will reopen. Have you known in your community, Mr. Ebert, are there any instances where one has closed and it's had an impact on others within the community?
I'd have to say the biggest thing that I've found so far is the ability to support farms with some of the infrastructure. With machinery dealers being closed, it's been tough to get parts, especially since everything's being shipped UPS or FedEx now, that, instead of going to your local dealership, there still are dealerships that are providing some curbside service, but if they don't have the part on stock, the biggest issue right now is getting stuff shipped to help support the farms and that. So, one blessing for being agriculture is it being a life-sustaining business that, a lot of the support is still there. Some of the other concerns on the other end of us shipping products are the farmers that are having to dump milk because of restaurants being closed, and the concern there is whether some of those are even going to be able to survive because they're not getting paid for those products, or the farmers that are having to euthanize animals or destroy their vegetable fruit crops and stuff like that. So those are some of the huge concerns for us right now, if those businesses are going to be able to survive or not.
Thank you. My next question, I'll direct it to any of the panelists that would like to respond. While the pandemic has obviously, no question about it, brought challenges and tragedy to many rural entrepreneurs, small businesses tend to be creative and agile, and they tend to be readily adaptable to changing circumstances. Can I ask, have any of you heard instances where small businesses have really risen to the challenge faced by this pandemic and succeeded, besides the odds being against them? Any particular notable instances that any of the panelists want to point out? Yes.
So we have a number of restaurants that have begun to make meals for families and freeze them and sell them in a frozen way. We actually made a loan to a business to purchase a freezer so that she could move and make that pivot. One of our entrepreneurs is actually making more money today with that line of business than she did having an open restaurant with seating. And now, of course, she's hoping to do both as she reopens the seating area slowly and carefully. Another business is a landscaping business, and they decided, with the help of our technical assistants, to begin to do delivery services of supplies, of plants, and they're also doing quite well compared to how they were doing before. So the entrepreneurs are really quite amazing in their resilience, and without capital, those opportunities often are very limited.
Okay, got a short period of time left if any of the other panelists want to give another example.
Well, Congressman, I just wanted to mention the fact that there are community-supported agriculture, farmers and ranchers who are delivering to your doorstep right now rather than boxing up a fruits and vegetables and having you come out to the farm. They're delivering it to you, and their business is actually going up. So these folks who typically would box things up and provide them to folks coming to their farm are delivering and doing a great job. They're nimble and they're smart.
That's tremendous. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think my time's expired. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chabot. His time has expired and he yields back. So now I'd like to recognize the lady from Minnesota, Miss Craig, who is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I want to start out quickly with a question for Mr. Ebert.
Everybody's nodding. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, there she is.
Oh, hello. Sorry about that.
I don't know. I don't think it was you. This was, I think, a glitch in the system here. So we will give you your 5 minutes back if you'd like it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. That's terrific. I had a great question, and now I should just ask you all to answer it. So this question is for, let me start with Mr. Ebert. Minnesota has a very robust ag sector. It also has a diverse set of rural industries that are attached to that sector, like biofuels plants, retail food markets, and more. These entities are not currently eligible for EIDL and are now hurting for it. While limiting EIDL loans to ag entities has helped them stay afloat, how has this limitation affected those rural economies beyond direct ag? Mr. Ebert?
Very much so, because for these businesses to continue on, they need this money. There's been a huge impact all across the rural community, and I think if SBA can make these funds more readily available with good guidelines for these businesses to follow, it would sure help bolster. I always say the farmers are one person and one entity, but it's the infrastructure that supports the whole system. So the better we can make infrastructure stronger through this pandemic, the better everybody will come out in the end.
Thank you. And I just have one more question perhaps for Mr. Minner. Unfortunately, we've seen such a massive disruptions throughout the food supply chain, especially in the livestock sector. And obviously, I've had farmers in my district in and around who've been forced to dump commodities because of that inability to move it to market. From your perspective, is the SBA working with communities to invest in these middle spaces of our food system, such as local processors to get food from the barnyard to the shelves? How can we be more helpful?
Congresswoman, I can't answer that directly, but I know the SBA team here in our state, and they have been fabulous. And from what I'm hearing from my counterparts at other rural development councils around their country, they're saying the same things about their SBA teams. They're also inundated too, and they're doing the best they can. So I can't guarantee you that those middle producers are being reached out to, but I have to imagine that they are.
Thank you for that. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I'll yield back to you in the great state of Iowa.
Thank you, friend from the north. On that note, we will recognize Mr. Oh, never mind. We're going to recognize another friend from the north, Congressman Staver from Minnesota. You are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Finkenauer. Thank you, Ranking Member Joyce. It's a privilege to be here today. And just a couple of things. We know that our rural areas, include many in our district, don't have the number of COVID cases in the urban or metro areas, but that does not mean that rural America hasn't been affected. We're shut down And what we need to do is make sure that our small businesses across America get back to where they were prior to the pandemic. As discussed earlier, Madam Chair, some of your panelists here, we talked about rural broadband, and I think this digital presence that we're seeing right now is extremely important as we move forward. Right now, during the pandemic, school kids across the nation have to go to parking lots to download their schoolwork at hotspots because of buses. That's unacceptable. And I think, Madam Chair, Ranking Member Joyce, we know that we can put a lot of effort into making sure every home matters in rural America. And I'm up here in northern Minnesota, very similar to many of your districts. I have a question for Mrs. Moretz, who works at the First Citizens Bank. When you are working with the PPP applications, are you happy that it's a 2.5 page quick application, which means that the SBA reduced the regulations and the redundancy? What has your good with that type of reducing the redundancy and regulation so you can get the capital to these firms in the head?
Can you repeat the second half of your question? You cut out on me. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's the real broadband part. I know. When you issue the PPP loans, are you happy with the 2.5 page application rather than the 23 page application you're used to?
Yeah.
Because what I'm saying is some of our rural communities don't have the ability to have all the staff to get it out. I just need to know, are you comfortable with that short, sweet application process?
I think the answer comes in two parts here. Number one, I'm very happy that the application is short because our customers don't have access all the time to broadband like you were talking about to print out this application, scan it, and fax it back to us. And as you know, I'm sure Minnesota is much the same. Our bank is open by appointment only right now. So a lot of people have been going through the drive-through to drop things off and printing, like we'll print it for them, give it to them in the drive-through, they come back later, drop it off. So I'm glad that the application has been simplified. The worry I have with the application being simplified and the later guidance that is now coming out about forgiveness is the application that they filled out enough for what they need to do to get the loan forgiven, if that makes sense. We're working diligently and we've processed, you talked about the number of staff. I am technically in our bank not a lender. I don't have the lending authority. My entire team was brought on because we don't have the staff to continue our regular business, to keep our businesses that want to make new loans, to grow their business going, and to help folks with the PPP. So my team was brought on to administer this program, and we are very fortunate that we are one of the larger banks in the area that has the capacity to do so, but that doesn't mean we weren't strained. Oftentimes when the SBA site was down, like I said, I'm working remote, I would put my kids down to bed at night and then sneak back in my office at midnight to 3 a.m. to process applications. So yes, we were definitely strained because of the sheer numbers we saw, and we were glad that it was a shorter application to review.
Thank you very much. Next question, Mr. Ebert. You had mentioned that the PPP program and the concern about the application and the payback. One of the things, those of us who are on the small business committee, we don't want the game changed midstream, where these people stated this is the application, here's the payback, and we're really fighting against that change in midstream. So to that point, Mr. Ebert, what improvements do you believe should be made to ensure our rural communities do not fall through the cracks during our nation's recovery? Knowing that there is going to be another relief package out there, do you think a percentage should be percentage of that federal investments into our state should be set aside for our rural communities, because it has hit rural America as it has metro? And what is your suggestion from that rural standpoint?
I'd have to say, thank you for the question. I think for the application, keep it simple like it is for the small business side, is to make sure those applications are adapted to agriculture and the unique nature of the business. We're just different in the way we operate and the forms we use. So to make sure those applications are related to what our business is, and that gives the farmer the choice to be able to be a part of that.
Okay, so in rural small town America, these investments are going to come from the federal government. How do you think your state legislatures should have the ability to convene and get the most fair and equitable way they can to include rural and our farming communities, because many of them are very small, as you know.
Mr. Stalker, I'm so sorry. I know time has expired, but I will I'll extend if 30 seconds. I know we're about wrapping up anyway, so if that's okay.
Now go ahead, answer that, Mr. Ebert, and then thank you, Chairwoman.
I mean, yeah, I think, if I understand the question right, let's legislate the next package or the next amount of funds to ensure that the rural community has access to them. And there's like the first round of funding, was gobbled up by large businesses right away, and we never had access to it. So.
Great. Well, the gentleman's time has expired, but I am very grateful for all of the folks, our friends across the country that joined us here. I know my colleagues. I've gotten to see in the hallways passing this last week and a couple of weeks before that, and I know we're all eager to get back to some sorts of normalcy all over the country. But I know we all have to be creative in the times that we are in, and I am, again, just really grateful for the staff too that helped out with this, and all of the panelists who joined. I know you guys are all very, very busy, so thank you. And I know I just want to kind of highlight something here and why this is so important. I know, typically would have you guys fly to Washington, D.C. and have these discussions, but these discussions are still important because part of how we come out of this and make sure that our communities have what they need, especially in our rural areas, is listening to the folks who are on the ground, living it every day, and are connected with folks. And so, one of the things that I learned pretty quickly here over the last couple of months, I had been in touch with some of the folks who had represented my district in particular in 2008, and then also other federal representatives who represented on the federal level in 2008. When my district, all across the country, we were going through the recession. We were also in my district going through horrific flooding and also hit with horrible tornadoes as well, all at once. And so it was about the closest I could get to where we are right now, and just have, and ask, what would you do differently? Or what are some of the things that you would want to make sure that we are doing? And the number one thing I heard was make sure you are listening to the folks on the ground, and also oversight and making sure that these agencies are getting the dollars out to the folks who need them the most. And so that's why these discussions today are so important, so we can hear how everything is being related. I know obviously there are some issues that we're seeing with the Small Business Administration. They've taken on a lot. Some of the folks on the ground here have been doing a great job, but the agency itself needs to be quicker when it comes to guidance, and when we get that information out to the business owners who are relying on it. And that's something we're going to continue to push the agency on as well. We just have got to get this right, and we've got to make sure that our small business owners have what they need, especially in our rural areas. Because also, when I think back to 2008, one of the things that we saw was really rural America get hit harder than even the rest of the country, because while urban and suburban communities were fueled by, a digital economy with new jobs, new startups, and ready access to capital, and they were really largely able to recover, many rural areas struggled with people moving away during that time and losing more and more jobs. So the geographic division in our country will likely intensify if we don't get this right when it comes to this recovery. And so that's why it's just really important for me that we have these conversations, because when, growing up in rural Iowa in particular, in a town called Sherrill, as I like to say, that has more cows than people, I know from my own experience that you wear where you're from here in Iowa, and I know and across the country in our small towns, like you wear your last name, right? And there is a real urgency here to protect our small towns, to make sure that we don't lose our main streets. And it's hitting differently in our smaller towns in rural America than it even is throughout the rest of the country. And so that's why these types of focused conversations are just so important. So I am very, very grateful for you guys taking that time, uplifting these issues, and it helps us now do a better job of taking these issues to the SBA and asking more questions and more poignant questions to get our small businesses what they need right now. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I wish you all the best. I hope you're all doing well. And I know we are going to get through this together. It's still going to be a long road ahead. But I know if we continue to listen to the folks, again, who need it most and do our best here, we can come out of this strong, but it is going to take a lot more work. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope eventually I get to see some of you in person again sooner than later. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Yep.